Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am talking about when you should reintroduce foods that you were once sensitive to, or how to know when to reintroduce foods after you or while you have like a skin issue or say like eczema, psoriasis, something like that. When we try to reverse our health issues naturally, oftentimes that involves avoidance of certain foods, removal of certain foods, so that we can give our body a break from some inflammation. And typically, at some point, we do want to try to reintroduce some foods just to give ourselves a little bit more variety with what we're eating. So I want to touch on this a little bit today, as this is a very common topic that I get asked questions about all the time. So before I do, my name is Marla. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist and homeopathic practitioner, and I've helped over 7,000 clients to date. I've been in practice for almost a decade, and I specifically specialize in psoriasis and skin issues and eczema, autoimmune disease mainly, but also a lot of gut as well. So I do a lot of work on clients that have IBS or IBD. And it's just something that comes up all the time. So I thought I'd share it here. I know a lot of you probably are interested in this topic. So let's just jump into it. What I always recommend, and I'm going to just talk about psoriasis here, but you can take all of this information and implement it into whatever health issue you have that led you to remove certain foods, whether it's a thyroid issue, gut issue, joint issue, etc. So for psoriasis, I have all my clients essentially remove any histamine forming foods or foods that will trigger histamine or inflammation. So the list is long. I won't go through all of it here, as I have talked about it extensively in previous videos, but you're looking at gluten and dairy, all forms of sugar, including natural sweeteners. You're looking at like seed oils, and then nightshades, of course, tomatoes and potatoes and peppers and eggplant. Unfortunately, these are histamine forming and driving foods, so they're something that we just have to remove, even though they are healthy foods overall. And the list goes on. Alcohol and caffeine, things like that. And so my clients ask all the time, well, how do we know when we can introduce these foods safely? So the question is kind of a hard one to answer, because the answer is no one really knows when is a good time. I always say you need to go first and foremost, and sorry, the lighting is really weird. It's the sun comes and goes, so it gets light and then dark, but I hope it's okay. It really comes down to, number one, you shouldn't reintroduce any foods, period, if you're still in a flare. So say you have psoriasis and your skin is very red and you see it improve, but it's still inflamed, it still is present, and you still find that it's fluctuating a little bit in terms of inflammation, you should not be reintroducing foods or even having that on your mind until you have gotten to a point where you have been in true remission, so no flares. And this applies to joint pain, it applies to the gut, any issue you have. You shouldn't be reintroducing until you've been in remission for several months. This can be the hardest part of the health journey, because if you have a condition that you've been dealing with for a good chunk of your life, it takes a long time to reverse it, which means you might have to avoid certain foods for over a year or 2 or 3. And that is where it can get really challenging for a lot of people, because it's keeping that strong mental game going. It can be really hard when there's certain things you want to eat and you can't. So I have videos where I talked about before how to change the mindset. And in my 60-day gut reset program, which includes all of the drainage for the liver and kidneys, a full pathogen cleanse, a full gut reset, it's incredible program. I'll link it down below with the discount code. But in that program, I work a lot on the mindset and how to think of not eating certain foods in a different way so that you don't want them as bad, or that you're okay with avoiding them. But essentially, once you've gotten to a point where you feel good and you felt good for a couple months, that's where you can start to reintroduce. You probably have brought your inflammation threshold. I shouldn't say threshold. Say your threshold is up here and then your inflammation is up here. You've reached your threshold. So you've probably, if you've been flare-free for a couple months, have brought your inflammation levels well below the threshold, maybe to here. And so your body can handle a good amount of inflammation before it's up here again, right? So that's where it becomes a good time to try to reintroduce foods. And naturally, by avoiding foods you're sensitive to and inflammatory foods, and then doing the work to fix the gut and reduce inflammation, you boost your secretory IgA antibodies in the gut, you decrease your IgM and your IgG antibodies, meaning your gut is probably going to be less reactive to foods and stronger in general so it can handle foods. So that is where it's a good time to start reintroducing. And I always say, certain people, like if you had done a food sensitivity test in the beginning of your healing journey, and say it came back with a list of 20 foods you're sensitive to, and you cut all of those out along with inflammatory foods and bad foods in general, and then a couple of months or year or so pass, and now you're feeling really good and you want to know, hey, can I reintroduce these foods? Before you reintroduce, I always say if it's within budget, it will save you a lot of stress and grief if you were to do a food sensitivity panel again. If you get a food sensitivity panel done and a lot of the foods that were on the first one are no longer on the second one, then you can probably try to reintroduce and see if your body has forgotten it has a problem with those foods. So you can pick a food on the food sensitivity list. If the food is still showing up as an IgG or an IgE reaction, I would be wary to introduce it. A lot of times people with autoimmune react to gluten and dairy long term. So those are foods that I personally say you might need to avoid for life. For me, I avoid gluten for life, even if I can have it, which I made a whole video on this channel recently about trying gluten, and I actually was okay. I still choose not to have it because I know that if I have it a little bit here or there, it can lead back to a full-blown issue again, which I don't want. And I'm very happy living gluten-free. It's very easy to do. So it's not a problem for me. But I do like to have dairy sometimes, and sometimes I do want sugar if I'm going out with the kids and I want to order a dessert, or I want to bake at home. And so I'm not going to avoid sugar for my whole life. I'm not going to avoid dairy for life if I don't have to. But gluten, I know it's something I can manage, and I know my body doesn't love it, so that's something I would avoid. And that's how I say take it, and turn it to your situation where you probably can reintroduce nightshades, and you probably can reintroduce a lot of the foods that you had initially removed. You might need to keep gluten out, but just pick one food at a time that you want to try, keeping gluten and dairy and sugar to the last introductions. Those are the top culprits. Everything else can come back in sooner. And then just try one food. You introduce it for, eat it once and then wait a week. If you feel okay, I introduce it a second time. I wait 2 days. If I feel okay, I introduce it a third time, 2 days after that. If I still feel okay, it's probably a food you can have going forward. And then you just do that with every food. It's tedious, but it's a good way to kind of figure out what you're eating that your body likes or doesn't like. And that way, if you do introduce a food and you're still reacting to it, you know exactly which food it was, and you can just remove it and say, I probably shouldn't have this again. And just keep doing that until you've gone through the list. Most of the time, if you've really properly sealed your gut, you've boosted your Sig-A, you've decreased your IgG and your IgM, you've really strengthened and regulated your immune system, pretty much all the foods that you removed should be able to come back, unless they are one, a true allergy, or two, a very long-standing food sensitivity. Again, typically gluten is a big trigger. But everything else should be able to come back. And that's exactly what I did when I was going through my psoriasis and PCOS and IBS healing journeys. I had to cut out the list of foods I couldn't eat was 10 times longer than the list of foods I could eat. But I had to cut everything out, and I did it, and it worked well. And then after I felt amazing for a good enough amount of time, I started bringing foods back in 1 or 2 at a time. And once I kind of got to everything off my list except gluten, I knew I didn't want to try gluten because they had told me I was borderline celiac. My transglutaminase levels were almost at celiac, but not quite enough yet to be a true allergy. So I was hesitant, and I said, I'm not going to try this for years. I just don't need it. I'm good living gluten-free. So I brought everything else back in. I eat, dairy in moderation. I'll have sugar, very infrequently, but enough that I'm not living a miserable life and I can't eat anything, right? And then gluten, it was just something that I was like, I just don't need or don't want to even risk, because prior to that, if I did have gluten, I would be covered in psoriasis. So it wasn't a risk I was willing to take just to reintroduce it. Years passed, and I made a video on YouTube not long ago explaining this. I decided to just do an experiment and try, essentially for you guys and for those who are always asking, do we have to be gluten-free for life? And I was able to reintroduce it. I did not have a flare, and I tried it a couple times, and I did not have a flare, which was nice, but I still am I don't think gluten's a healthy food, so it's not something I want anyway. And so I'm happy keeping it out. But it was just an experiment. But it was nice to see that I was able to reintroduce it years later. So I hope that this kind of explained a little bit more on how to know when to bring the foods back. I tell my clients, don't even consider bringing foods back until you have felt good enough and de-inflamed for a long enough period of time, which is typically a couple months, to start considering. The issue is if you bring foods in too quick or too frequently that are inflammatory, that inflammation that you brought down that gave you all the results that you have can cut back up very quickly, and you can be back to square one. So you want to move slow so you don't undo everything that you had done previously in terms of healing. And once you got into a point where you feel really confident that your body is like, it's doing well, then you can start bringing things in one at a time and see how it goes. My 60-day gut reset program walks you through all of that, and I have there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of incredible information. It's a 10-week program with the option to add on a really epic candida and parasite cleanse that's included in the price and everything. And within that, you can sign up now and start anytime. You don't have to start at the same time as everybody. You can kind of work at your own pace, but we do have our private Facebook community where I'm sharing lots of support and tips, and we have live Zoom meetings, and there's questions and stuff that you can ask. So there's a lot of support in there, but in that program, I talk about how to boost your secretory IgA, how to decrease your IgG, your IgM in the gut, which makes you more susceptible to leaky gut and things like that. So everything that you need to completely seal up your gut so that you can reintroduce these foods is all in there. It's like a whole body protocol to just clear out the eliminatory organs, the liver, the kidneys, the gut, the lungs, things like that. And then we also do immune regulation. So if you have high histamine or inflammation, the protocol helps to regulate and modulate that, plus all the candida, parasite cleansing, leaky gut protocol. It's all there step by step by step. So it's an incredible program. I would love and be so honored for you to join. If you would consider that with the discount code down below, which will save you a little bit of money off the program. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you in the next video.